Alright, Zechariah 9. By the way, in case you're wondering, yes, I have stubble on my face today. I just didn't shave this morning. I'm not trying to grow a beard or anything. I didn't shave this morning, and I had an opportunity to squeeze. My cats are all sleeping in the bedroom right now, and so I hope they'll stay there. This is usually the time for their afternoon naps, and so hopefully they will not bother me for the next hour or so. I'll be able to get this done without them bothering me. And so I just didn't want to take the time to shave my face because that could potentially wake them up and cause them to start disturbing me. So that's why I look the way I do today. Okay, Zechariah 9, an oracle. The word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach, and will rest upon Damascus. Now Damascus was the capital of Aram. This had been a major enemy of Israel back in the early days of the kingship. They fell at the hands of Assyria right before Israel itself fell to Assyria, and they haven't really been a threat ever since. But we're tracking someone's progress from north through south to the Promised Land. This ultimately is going to be referring to Alexander the Great. It doesn't actually say that. Okay, we don't actually identify him in these verses, but historically, this material was fulfilled and the conquest of Alexander the Great as he marched through this area of the world on his fight against Persia, basically. All this area had been conquered by Persia and was under Persian territory and control. And Alexander the Great comes in and takes it from Persia on his way to defeating Persia. That's what is actually being referred to here in historical fulfillment. So the word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach and will rest upon Damascus. I don't know exactly where Hadrach is, but somewhere in the area north of Damascus. For the eyes of men and all the tribes of Israel are on the Lord. So everyone's walking to see what the Lord does here. And upon Hamath too, which borders on it, and upon Tyre and Sidon, although they are very skillful. Tyre has built herself a stronghold. I remember Isaiah prophesied against Tyre, Ezekiel prophesied against Tyre. Ezekiel even said that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of his own day, Babylon, was going to come against Tyre, but would ultimately not be able to capture it, or at least not capture it completely, and the job would be ultimately left to somebody else. And that somebody else is Alexander. There's actually two Tyres. There's a city on the sea called Tyre, and then there's a city on the mainland called Tyre. Nebuchadnezzar took the mainland city of Tyre, but he could not get to the city that was on the sea of Tyre. Alexander eventually does, and he actually takes the ruins of the mainland city of Tyre and uses that to build a bridge, a land bridge, a causeway, out to the island fortress, and that's how he gets there. That's in the 330s BC. Zechariah is prophesying sometime around 500, or maybe in the early 400s BC. So about 150 plus years earlier. But Daniel himself mentioned that Alexander was going to come, or the Grecian kingdom was going to come and replace the Persian kingdom. And this is part of that process. Tyre has built herself a stronghold. She has heaped up silver like dust, and gold like the dirt of the streets. So silver and gold is plentiful in Tyre. It's just like dust and dirt. It's so plentiful that it's not any more valuable than dust and dirt. That's how much gold and silver they've got. But the Lord will now remember, Tyre had been a partner of Israel once upon a time. Tyre is blessed because they once blessed Israel. Remember, that goes all the way back to God's original covenant with Abraham. I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Once upon a time, Tyre blessed Israel. Tyre was a partner with building of the temple of the Lord in the days of David and Solomon. They gave the stuff, they gave the Israelites the materials. In fact, they were there helping to actually build the building itself, and the temple itself was likely based off of Phoenician designs. So they were there. That's why Ezekiel called the prince of Tyre, you were in Eden, you were in the garden of God. It isn't referring to Satan or Lucifer. It's saying that, Tyre, above all the Gentile nations, was privileged to be here in the temple. They provide the materials for the temple, they provide the design for the temple, they provide the workers to put the temple together. They were partners with the kings of Israel to build this temple. And by such, the prince of Tyre, therefore, had been in Eden, had been in the garden of God. The temple itself was a new garden, was a new Eden, just like the tabernacle had been. So Tyre had blessed Israel, and because of that, I believe, was blessed by God. So they are an example of a nation that had been a friendly nation, but has since become proud. I don't know if they really ever turned hostile, and they were not as hostile to the Israelites as a lot of the nations around them were, but they are fallen in the sense that they had been on very friendly terms with the Israelites, but eventually they're I mean, Jezebel is a Phoenician princess, and she entered the Israelite royal family and tried to turn everyone into Baal worshippers. So Tyre eventually fell. But at one point in time, Tyre was blessed. And Tyre's final judgment is going to come at the hands of Alexander the Great, who will finally take the island city of Tyre once and for all. But the Lord will take away her possessions and destroy her power on the sea, and she will be consumed by fire. Ashkelon will see this and fear. So this is the Philistine cities. Tyre was a Phoenician city. Phoenicia and Philistia were on the coast of Israel. Phoenicia being north of Israel, or north of Philistia. And the Philistines have been here for a long time. Okay, I mean, we've been fighting them since the days of the judges. And so whatever remnant of the Philistines is still left are still, and they had 5 capital cities: Ashkelon, Gaza, Gath, Ekron, and Ashdod. Those are their 5 capital cities. One of them is already gone. Gath, the city where David had once taken refuge, is now gone. And there's 4 left. And they're all going to see this invasion of Tyre by Alexander the Great and be feared, because he's going to come to them next on his way south of the land. Ashkelon will see it and fear. Gaza will writhe in agony, and Ekron too, for her hope will live. These are all the Philistine cities. Gaza will lose her king, and Ashkelon will be deserted. Foreigners will occupy Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. I will take the blood from their mouths, the forbidden food from between their teeth. It means they're eating food with the blood still in it. You're not supposed, I mean, this is the Israelite law, but you're not supposed to eat meat with the blood still in it. Leviticus 17. Verse 10. Any Israelite, or this is amongst a series of instructions about eating meat the proper way. And this is one of the instructions. And it says in verse 10, any Israelite or any alien living among them who eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut him off from his people. For the life of a creature is in the blood. And I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. Therefore I say to the Israelites, none of you may eat blood, nor may an alien living among you eat blood. Any Israelite or any alien living among you who hunts any animal or bird that may be eaten must drain out the blood and cover it with earth, because the life of every creature is its blood. That is why I have said to the Israelites, you must not eat the blood of any creature, because the life of every creature is its blood. Anyone who eats it must be cut off. So it was not forbidden. Even the foreigners living among them, which technically the Philistines were, because they were living on land that God had given the Israelites. They were not supposed to eat meat with the blood still in it. So I will take the blood from their mouths, the forbidden food from between their teeth. Those who are left will belong to our God. So some of them will survive. God always promises a remnant, even amongst these foreign nations that he's judging. Some of them will survive, and some of them will turn to him. Those who are left will belong to our God and become leaders in Judah. And Ekron will be like the Jebusites. The Jebusites are the people who originally occupied the city of Jerusalem. And when David took it, even after David finally took it, the Jews didn't get Jerusalem until the days of David. And even when David finally took it, some Jebusites are still there. In fact, the guy that he bought the land from that would eventually be where they built the temple was a Jebusite. So some of the Jebusites remained in the city and intermingled with the people and became Judahites eventually. But I will defend my house against marauding forces. Never again will an oppressor overrun my people, for I am keeping watch. Alexander the Great did not end up destroying Jerusalem. He came to the city and did not attack the city. Josephus, in his account, explains that Alexander the Great he gives a reason why. Now, of course, the smart people will tell you that's all made up. But the fact is that Alexander the Great did not destroy Jerusalem. So God did, for however he did it, in whatever way he did it, God did defend Jerusalem from Alexander the Great, because Alexander the Great did not attack Jerusalem. Now, it is not literally true that from that point onward, never again will oppress or overrun my people. That's going to happen again to them. In fact, we won't even talk about it here in a couple of chapters. It's happening to them again. Alexander the Great came upon Jerusalem in the year 333 or so BC. I don't know, somewhere around 335-ish BC, give or take a year or two. I don't know the timeline all that well. But Alexander's entire career as a military leader lasted about 12 years. And it was basically in the 330s BC. He died in like 321 BC or something like that, or somewhere around those ways. So it was just about 335-ish BC. And the Israelites are going to be overrun by oppressors in the future from this point forward. So that statement is not literally true. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you. Righteous and having salvation, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Now this could be referring partially to Alexander the Great, as someone who comes to the city but does not attack it. They surrendered to him, and they initially did not. When he was fighting Tyre, he actually sent messengers to Jerusalem asking for help, and did not get it because they had sworn fealty to Persia. Okay, of course, Persia was a sworn enemy of Greece, and had been for 200 years at that point. But that didn't make Alexander very happy, so he was going to come and destroy Jerusalem once he got done with Tyre. But somehow or another, they appeased him, and then they swore fealty to him, and he became the ruler of Jerusalem without having to conquer the city through violence. So it could be a reference to him. I think that to some degree it is. Just like in Isaiah 7, when we read about the prophecy of the virgin birth, the immediate application of that prophecy probably was to the son that Isaiah likely had with his unmarried woman, his young unmarried wife at that time, and named that guy Maher-Shalal Hashbaz. But that prophecy ultimately points to the virgin birth of Jesus. I think the prophecy of the riding in on a colt full of a donkey may also have two. We see that a lot. Cyrus himself is used as an example of a servant, paving the way for the real servant to come. John says in his gospel about this, when Jesus came into the city of Jerusalem in that last week, Jesus found a young donkey. This is John 12, starting in verse 14. Found a young donkey and sat upon it, as is written, Do not be afraid, O daughter of Zion. See, your king is coming. See it on a donkey's colt. At first, the disciples did not understand all this, so they didn't even catch the significance of it until afterwards. Only after Jesus was glorified did they realize that these things had been written about him, and that they had done these things to him. So they knew about this prophecy in Zechariah already, that they didn't apply to Jesus until sometime afterwards. They thought, aha! So the ultimate application of this verse does apply to Jesus, but it's very possible also that figuratively and symbolically, the initial application of it is to Alexander the Great. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim. Chariots are an instrument of war, so he's taking away the warfare from Ephraim, the northern kingdom. And the war horses from Jerusalem. And the battle bow will be broken. So we're not going to fight anymore. The fighting will be done. He will proclaim peace to the nations. This is obviously Jesus here. His rule will extend from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth, to the end of the land. Again, that could be referring somewhat to Alexander the Great, but the full fulfillment of this passage is Jesus. As for you, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit. Return to your fortress, O prisoners of hope. Even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you. I'm assuming he's referring here to the people who are still living outside the Holy Land. You know, as we read about already, and as we're going to continue reading about, not all of them came back, but only a few of them did. After they were captured and scattered, only a few of them ever made their way back. The rest were all still living out there. So although they were voluntarily living there, they chose not to go back. They were still referred to by the prophets as captives. So I think that he's referring to just like the Jews who were still living outside the Holy Land, and thus, in the prophet's mind, were still basically prisoners. Return to your fortress, O prisoners of hope. Even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you. I will bend Judah as I bend my bow, and I will fill it with Ephraim. So he's going to use Ephraim as an arrow and the bow of Judah. I will rouse your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece, and I will make you like a warrior's sword. He's referring to the Grecian Empire that will take over the land after Alexander the Great's death. We haven't heard Greece mentioned very much in the scriptures. Greece ultimately descends from Javan, one of the, let's see here, let's go all the way back to Genesis 10. Way back here, this Bible's falling apart. I need to get a new one. The Table of Nations. The Japhethites, the sons of Japheth, Genesis 10 verse 2. Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The Greeks come from Javan. So the Japhethites more or less left the area of the Middle East, the area around Palestine, and went to other parts of the earth. They went to Europe, they went to Asia. That's where the white people come from. That's where the Asian people come from. And Javan is a descendant of, is the ancestor of the Greeks. And we haven't heard a lot about them in the scriptures because they're mostly out doing their own thing. They're mostly not in the story as main characters because they're out kind of doing their own thing in other parts of the world. But we do hear a reference here because when Greece comes, now Greece has been kind of nudging into the story for a couple of hundred years now. But in the days of Persia, Greece and Persia have a long fight with each other that lasts basically throughout the entire history of the Persian Empire, and ultimately results in Greece defeating Persia in the 330s BC and extending the Grecian Empire all the way to the Persian kingdom. And so now Greece will start taking over as the main threat. Now the Old Testament itself does not really get into that period. It doesn't really stretch that far. But here we are having an oracle about what's going to happen in years to come. So Greece will soon take over as the main enemy. Alexander the Great himself is not. He takes Jerusalem in peace, and they swear fealty to him without him fighting them. But his generals who divide the kingdom after him will fight over this land. So Greece will be the enemy at some point in time. We read about that in Daniel. Then the Lord will appear over them. His arrow will flash like lightning. The sovereign Lord will sound the trumpet. He will march in the storms of the south, and the Lord will shield them. They will destroy and overcome with slingshots. This is probably referring to when the Jews, have to fight for their kingdom from the Greeks. So we read about this in Daniel. We saw the history previewed in Daniel, laid out in Daniel chapters 8 and 10. And at 8 and 10 and 11 and into 12, previewing the history of the people during the time within the Testaments. But after Alexander the Great dies, his kingdom ultimately is broken up into parts, and each of his generals gets a part. And the land of Israel is originally occupied or controlled by the Ptolemy Empire, the Ptolemy branch of the kingdom, which is centered in Egypt. And they have it for a number of years, and eventually the Jews help the northern kingdom, the Seleucids, which rule Syria and the lands to the north of Israel, and they encroach to the south, and the Jews eventually throw their lot in with them, hoping to get rid of the Ptolemies. We talked about this when we read the preview of it in Daniel. And that will actually backfire on them because when the Seleucids take over, they will try to force the Jews to Hellenize, and that's the term we use to describe people who... When Alexander the Great came... Okay, so the Persians, as just a bit of a history lesson, we'll read about this when we read Ezra 5 and 6 and the rest of Ezra, but the Persians were actually pretty tolerant of the cultures that they conquered. Read about this with Cyrus. He allowed the people that the captive people he inherited from Babylon. He allowed them to go back to their lands and worship their gods. They had to pay tribute to him, but they were allowed to live their lives basically as they saw fit, as long as they paid him taxes. And that was the custom of the Persian Empire. And we're going to read about that. We're going to see more examples of that from some of the later kings as we want to get back to Ezra and read following on down. They didn't have a problem with people worshiping other gods as long as the people A paid taxes and B, requested, prayed to their gods for blessing the Persian kings. Okay, the Persians are willing to take blessings from any god they could take it from. When the Greeks come along, that's not the case anymore. The Greeks want everyone to follow the Greeks' god and follow the Greek way of living. Alexander the Great wants everyone to become a Greek, basically. And that's pretty much the way the Greek Empire is going to run itself, and that's going to be the influence that they leave behind for centuries. Even the Romans, who conquered the Greeks, ultimately became like the Greeks. There is something very desirable about the Grecian way of living. I don't know. Even today, the children of the Enlightenment today, these so-called smart people of the Western world, the 1700s and following, still want to be like the ancient Greeks. I don't know what it is about these ancient Greeks, but for some reason, large parts of the world have wanted to model themselves after the ancient Greeks for thousands of years now. And that's going to happen, we talk about that, and in the form of Antiochus Epiphanes IV, a ruler of this northern kingdom, and he's going to try to force all the Jews of that area to become Greeks, and to become, followers of the Grecian gods and worship the Grecian customs and all that. So that's what this is referring to. We read about that in Daniel. When Daniel gave his preview of Israelite history from that point forward, he covered that material in Daniel's chapter 8 and 11. And I think that's what this is referring to here. Once the Grecian Empire comes, Alexander the Great himself may not fight the Jerusalem, but his descendants will, and the Jews will then fight back and try to get rid of that influence. And the Lord will be with them to help them. So the Lord will appear over them. His arrow will flash like lightning. The sovereign Lord will sound the trumpet. He will march in the storms of the south, and the Lord Almighty will shield them. They will destroy and overcome with slingstones. They will drink and roar as with wine. They will be full like a bowl used for sprinkling the corners of the altar. That's the way they sprinkle the blood on the altar, so they're going to be full of blood. The Lord their God will save them on that day as a flock of his people. They will sparkle in his land like jewels in a crown. How attractive and beautiful they will be. Grain will make the young men thrive, and new wine the young women. So we're going to get the girls drunk so we can have fun with them, huh? Is that what's going to happen here? I don't know, but it sure sounds like it. At any rate, it's going to be a happy, celebratory day. Ask the Lord for rain in the springtime. It is the Lord who makes the storm clouds. He gives showers of rain to men, and plants of the field to everyone. The idols speak deceit. These are probably the Grecian idols that the Grecian Empire, the Seleucids, will try to enforce in Israel. As a general rule, once they came back from the exile, the Judahites, the Jews, didn't have problems with idolatry again. They did get rid of their idol. Eventually, if anything, what they end up doing is making the law their idol, eventually. But by and large, from the time they returned from exile, they did not have trouble with idolatry again. So these idols that are being referred to here are probably the Grecian idols that Antiochus Epiphanes IV and others of that regime try to force the Jews to adopt during that time period. The idols speak deceit. Diviners see visions that lie. They tell dreams that are false. They give comfort in vain. Therefore, the people wander like sheep, oppressed for lack of a shepherd. My anger burns against the shepherds, but I will punish the leaders. For the Lord Almighty will care for his flock, the house of Judah, and make them like a proud horse in battle. There were a lot of Jews in that day who wanted to side with the Greeks, who wanted to Hellenize and become like Greeks. And that, I think, is what God is referring to here as being mad at. From Judah will come the cornerstone. From him the tent peg. From him the battle bow. From him every ruler. Together they will be like the mighty men trampling the muddy streets in battle. Because the Lord is with them, they will fight and overthrow the horsemen. Excuse me. I will strengthen the house of Judah and save the house of Joseph. I will restore them because I have compassion on them. They will be as though I had not rejected them, for I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. This could be a general reference to God being with the people after the exile. It could also be a more specific reference to him helping them in this time of distress in the days of Antiochus Epiphanes and that regime of the world in the 100s BC, or both, could be referring to both. Their children, the Ephraimites have become like mighty men, and their hearts will be glad as with wine. Now remember, in Ephraim was the most prominent tribe in the northern kingdom, and it got to the point where a lot of times we just refer to the northern kingdom as Ephraim. We saw that in Hosea in particular. The closer we got to the end, the more it seemed that Ephraim had. In fact, it even seems for a while there may have been even a split kingdom. There may have even been three kingdoms. It's possible there was even like a rival rulership near the end of the northern kingdom. Possibly, we don't really know for sure. But Ephraim became, like I said, the standout tribe in the northern kingdom. And a lot of the prophets of that time period referred to Israel, the northern kingdom, as Ephraim. So here, Zechariah, a post-exile prophet, is doing that again. He is adopting the language of the previous prophets for the sake of making it seem like Israel, north and south, is united. The Ephraimites have become like mighty men, and their hearts will be glad as with wine. Their children will see it and be joyful. Their hearts will rejoice in the Lord. I will signal for them and gather them in. Surely I will redeem them. They will be as numerous as before. Though I scatter them among the peoples, yet in distant lands they will remember me. This is undoubtedly referring to the exiled people. They and their children will survive, and they will return. I will bring them back from Egypt and gather them from Assyria. Those are just two of the example nations of places where they've been captured. They were captured in Egypt, they were captured in Assyria. And they've been captured in more places than that, but those two are just being used as an example. All the places that they've been captured in or taken to. I'll bring them to Gilead and Lebanon. Now, Gilead and Lebanon were not technically part of the Promised Land. Gilead was in that region east of the Jordan River, which the Israelites did inhabit, but they weren't actually wasn't part of their promised boundaries given to them by God. And Lebanon was north of Israel. It was actually not part of the Promised Land. So the Promised Land itself was going to be so full of people that they're going to have to still be on their boundaries, beyond their borders, to hold them all. I will bring them to Gilead and Lebanon, and there will not be enough room for them. They will pass through the sea of trouble. That's probably referring to the sea that they passed through on the way to the Promised Land in the beginning. The surging sea will be subdued, and all the depths of the Nile will dry up. Assyria's pride will be brought down. Well, Assyria itself has already passed away as a nation. We're just using that as an example here. And Egypt's scepter will pass away. Egypt itself has also been conquered as a nation at this point. That's already, historically, factually, that's already happened. Assyria ceased to exist over 100 years earlier. Egypt was conquered, never to be independent again by the Persians in 525 BC. So that's already happened as a historical fact at this point when Zechariah is giving this prophecy. So he's just using these as examples of what's going to happen to the nations that oppress the Israelites, oppress God's people. I will strengthen them in the Lord, and in his name they will walk, declares the Lord. Okay, that's enough of that. I'll start a new video next. This is not done, by the way. I wanted to get the entire first oracle done in one video, but this one's getting to be too long. Chapter 11 goes with chapters 9 and 10 as one unit of thought, one oracle. Remember, an oracle, that word also can be translated as burden, and it connotes the thought of something heavy that the prophet is carrying to discharge to the people. Like this message that he's carrying, the message he has to speak to the people is heavy on him. It's weighing him down, and he's releasing it to the people and weighing them down with it too. So this is part of the oracle. Chapter 11 goes with 9 and 10, but this video is getting so long, I'm going to start a new one now.